Howdy ho, folks. Howdy ho. Howdy ho, America and points beyond. Who has power and what are they doing with it? Politics is not a natural act.
That's right.
That's right.
I must admit, I never heard that one from you, Tom.
There's so many feisty fighters against the greedheads and boneheads. So grab a libation, join the conversation. It's the personal side of politics, and it is surprisingly tasty. And indeed, we are back on track with another Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour here at the old Chat and Chew Cafe, inviting you to join me, to join Jim Hightower, by the way, that's my name, me and Deanna Zant, as always with us, and lowdowners throughout the greater universe in this of what will be a two-part expose of something that is not supposed to be possible in our greater United States of America, and that is a political coup. No, I'm not talking about January 6th. I'm not talking about Donnie Trump. I'm talking about something real. So grab a libation, pull up a chair. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We want you to be a part of it. I am drinking, just for this occasion, a beer called Agnus Dei. Because we want to appeal to all religions to come to out of this mess that we're in. This is a brewery called Save the World Brewing Company out here in Marble Falls, Texas.
All right.
And yeah, because we want to see if we can't save the world from something rather awful that is taking place right here in the United States of America. So I'm drinking this Agnus Dei and DZ. What in the world are you drinking?
I have I'm for once not drinking my bougie Chardonnay drink, drink like it's a kid's drink or something. I am actually drinking this. It's a special edition barley wine called Captain Precocious from the Elementary Brewing Company out in Hackensack, New Jersey. Shameless plug for friends, but it is delicious. And I am not normally a barley flavor, like those things don't normally happen in my world. And I'm kind of blown away. And I also, if you don't mind, want to plug one more thing. I just got this week and it's very exciting. The t-shirt that I'm wearing tonight.
Show us it. Show it. Show it.
Say gay, Ron DeSantis.
Take that.
This is by a Disney employee, a Pixar employee, and all proceeds go to anti-DeSantis and pro-LGBTQ plus organizing in Florida, and I'll post the link in the comments. But speaking of the comments, let us know where you're watching from and what you're drinking and what questions you have about the madness that we're about to embark upon. So take it away, Hightower. Tell us everything.
Because this is a real life version of that 200-odd year fable called The Emperor's New Clothes. Probably we all remember that. The emperor prancing in front of a mirror to see how magnificent his new wardrobe was. His attendants saying, "Oh my gosh, it just looks beautiful. This is just terrific what you're wearing there." And then he went out to promenade among the public, and the public exclaimed with just wonder about his appearance. "How fine are the emperor's new clothes," they shouted. "Don't they fit him to perfection?" But then a little child pipes up and says, "But he hasn't anything on." One person after another whispered. The child says he doesn't have anything on. And then the whole town erupts in unison and says he doesn't have anything on. Well, that's what we're talking about here tonight, is an emperor who has no clothes. But who is this emperor? The person who will tell us is not a child, but Lisa Graves. She's been with us before. Lisa is a terrific watchdog, fighter, researcher, digger, lawyer, taking on the powers that be in the judicial area, which too often we pay no attention to. This is the littlest branch and the littlest known branch of our government. Lisa has been the chief counsel for nominations of the United States Senate Judiciary Committee, under Pat Leahy, senator from Vermont. She's been Deputy Assistant Attorney General during the Clinton administration and has worked with the American Civil Liberties Union on all matters of Supreme Court and federal courts generally. Lisa, thank you for being with us. We notice you seem to be in a pickup truck. Is that correct? What is that?
I am, Jim. Thank you so much. I'm in our Chevy pickup truck with my RV behind me, and I'm happy to be able to join you. It's an honor to be on your show anytime, and today from the pickup truck.
Fantastic. You're on your way. Where are you then in your pickup truck?
We are in Lake City, Florida, almost to the Florida border. We've almost gotten out of DeSantis's jurisdiction, and I'm headed home to Wisconsin. On to
Wisconsin. Just too warm there in Florida for you. You need to get a little chill in your blood, right?
Oh, it's 29 degrees, and where I live in Wisconsin this morning. But we're headed home anyway. Yep.
Well, let's talk about this coup. And you may correct me if you think it's too strong a word to say coup, but the coup I'm talking about is the Supreme Court of the United States, which has become a right-wing partisan corporate entity, pushing a plutocratic vision on America, with most Americans having no idea that it is even happening. Give us just your general perspective of whether that's anywhere near correct.
Well, I think it is, Jim, and it saddens me to say that because for my lifetime, the Supreme Court has, or at least many years ago, began actually enforcing the real terms of the Constitution, like the equal protection of the law. Insisting that we can have a Voting Rights Act and we can have a Civil Rights Act, and that Gideon versus Wainwright, that you have a right to counsel, all those things. And then there's been this reaction to that brief period, from the 50s and 60s. There's been this reaction to try to roll back those rights. And now we have what you say is basically a coup, where we have this faction in control of our highest court in this country. This faction has been put in place without real honesty with the American people about what the agenda of those judges that have been put on that court is, what their agenda is. And that agenda is extreme, regressive, and repressive. And they now have, in essence, the majority to begin to roll back even more rights than they already have with some of the decisions in the last few years with Citizens United and the Voting Rights Act. And so we have an unelected, a small group of unelected individuals who I think arrogantly believe that they can impose their personal views on the law and start repealing our legal precedents that we rely upon. And it's really, it is a real takeover of America, and a takeover by some of the most regressive, narrow-minded, repressive people that have ever sat on that court.
And it's done intentionally. It's done deliberately, and it's been done incrementally. You tend to think of coups in terms of thugs in Russia, in China, in Yugoslavia, in Venezuela, wherever, but not here in America. And that we would rebel here in our country. We knew that the coup was taking place, but this has been underway for how long, Lisa? Would you think that they've been trying to dominate the court with these particular kinds of justices who favor a plutocratic view rather than democratic?
Well, there was a strong reaction to the Supreme Court's unanimous decision in Brown versus Board of Education back in 1954. And that really was one of the most profound and honorable decisions of that court, to right nearly 100 year, actually more than 100 years really, of wrong in terms of our Constitution, in particular, that 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. And so when Nixon ran, for office back in 1968, he ran on this sort of law and order racist dog whistle campaign, and he won, and he began to put some right-wing people on the court. And then Reagan sort of doubled down, said he was going to put people on to overturn Roe versus Wade, and he also did a lot of dog whistling and try to pack the court, but they, just couldn't quite do it yet. Then George Herbert Walker Bush first put on Justice Souter, David Souter, who has since, retired, and he was castigated for not choosing someone extreme enough. So they turned around and put Clarence Thomas on the court. So really, Clarence Thomas, who is now the longest sitting member of this Supreme Court, was the beginning of this extremely radical, reactionary faction. He's the senior member of that faction, and he's been joined by Samuel Alito, who was appointed by George W. Bush. He's been joined by the 3 Trump appointees, so they have 5. And then John Roberts, who's no moderate, but somehow is just the teeniest bit less to the right than those 5. And we can talk more, obviously, about how those 3 Trump justices were appointed. But the reality is that there are only 9 members of the U.S. Supreme Court. This faction is 5, perhaps 6, so they have majority, and they appear to be determined to begin overturning our rights. And we know that because this Supreme Court can choose its entire jurisdiction. Unlike other courts in the country where you file a case and it gets assigned to a judge and that judge has to hear the case or rule on it, the Supreme Court's jurisdiction is basically entirely discretionary. They get thousands of requests for appeals. They take only 90 a year, and they've chosen these cases. They've hand-picked the cases they're about to decide in order to, in my view, begin this massive rollback of our rights.
And now in recent years, they have begun to generate those cases, to create them so that they are ready for plucking whenever the right-wing majority on the court, which is now a 6-person majority out of 9. So let's just back up a little bit, Lisa, and talk about the court itself. Again, this is the smallest branch of government. 9 people out of 330 million Americans, 9 people control this court. And it is just inordinately powerful. As Lisa's just indicated, they can choose their own cases. And a bare majority of 5 can arbitrarily overrule presidents, overrule Congress, overrule governors, overrule legislatures, overrule your personal decisions in life, overrule workplaces, overrule whatever whim hits them on any given morning that they might wake up. Lisa, these 9 people, and they operate under the banner. It's on the facade of the Supreme Court building, also known as the Temple in Washington, a banner that says equal justice under law. Yet these are not really regular Americans, are they, Lisa? Where do they come from?
Those are great points, Jim. They are not regular Americans. They're all from the Ivy League. I think almost all of them went to the Ivy League law schools. They are people who, some of them have come from very posh backgrounds. They are a majority of men, but now they are also a substantial majority of Catholics, even though Catholics aren't a majority in the United States. And they are people who have been chosen. Certainly the Trump nominees, and I would say the Bush nominees, were really chosen by a very narrow, very small group of individuals, a clique of people who have very extremist views about women's rights, who want to repeal Roe versus Wade, who have very extremist views about corporate rights, in the sense of wanting to expand corporate rights and limit the ability of we the people to regulate corporations. And you could hear those that sort of promise or what was going on in a speech that Leonard Leo gave. He was the person who Donald Trump tapped as his judicial advisor. He gave a speech after Kavanaugh was confirmed, and in that speech he told an audience of funders and fellow activists that no one in that room had seen the type of revolution, which he called a revival of the Constitution. He called it a, quote, structural Constitution. And he said no one in that room had seen the types of cases and a revival of this old law, this law from the robber baron era, no one alive in that room had seen this sort of revival that was about to take place, that we were, quote, at the precipice of. And so he has put that in place, and it really does not bode well for the health of our democracy and for the rights of our people.
No, it's a not just a slide backwards. It is a jet-powered slide backward. It's a doctrine called the Lochner Era. This is more than anybody wants to know, but that is the title of it. It does have a title, and what that means is the time before the New Deal, basically, and a return to the robber baron period when labor had no rights. When voting minorities, which were not just people of color, but also older people, young people, et cetera, had no voting rights. A time when the moneyed elites ran not just their corporations, not just the economy, but ran the culture of America, the society itself. Their view, and which was a view that they should be the decision makers, that they were entitled because of their wealth, and that property rights took precedent over every other right, and that indeed they would argue that property rights were the object of the Constitution itself. That it was not a document to frame democracy. It was a document to keep the money of the elites away from democracy itself, away from being used for Social Security, being used for education, being used for anything else that they didn't want. They were to rule. Believe it or not, in this time, we're in 2022, and here we are, going back to that, because that is what this coup is all about. That's the doctrine that they want to enforce. I'm going to take a little pause here because I forgot to mention that Lisa has her own drink and wants to be proud about this. So tell us what you're drinking.
Oh, I've got the shine on it, but I have New Glarus beer. It's called Two Women because of two women who helped create one of these types of beer. And this is from New Glarus, the New Glarus Brewery in New Glarus, Wisconsin. And it is quite delicious. So I'm going to take a sip.
All right. Know it well. New Glarus, the home of the spotted cow.
Yes, it is.
I had several in my days in
Yes.
Wisconsin. And coming back, by the way, I'll be there for the Fighting Bob Fest this year. I think it's in September, October, somewhere down in there. Anyway, who cares? But it's a wonderful time and always wonderful. Beer drinking and brats is a way of life there in Wisconsin. But a way of life in America is supposed to be that we, the people, are the ultimate authority. Yet now we've got a Supreme Court that's got a different view of that. And the great irony, it seems to me, Lisa, and I'm basing this on some of the reading I've done of your terrific work, is that the Supreme Court, despite its incredible power, again, able to overrule any other government, basically, and individuals. Despite that power, it is an astonishingly weak organization. Why is that?
Well, the Supreme Court doesn't have any real enforcement power. It doesn't have police power, in essence. It does have a contempt power, I guess, in the sense that the judiciary in general has a contempt power, but it really relies on people's willingness to follow its rulings. And that is based in part on the notion of public confidence, that there should be respect for or deference to the ruling of the court. And I think that deference is rightfully in doubt, and actually this court is unworthy of deference, quite frankly, in my personal view. It's been packed by these right-wingers, illegitimately so. You had someone who was put on the court after a nominee who was widely regarded as a fair judge, Merrick Garland. He was blocked for the last year of President Obama's presidency. President Obama was legitimately duly elected twice as president, but Mitch McConnell and the dark money groups and dark money billionaires who wanted to try to capture the court blocked that appointment from being confirmed, and then they immediately installed this right-winger, very extreme fellow named Neil Gorsuch into that position. Then another opening came up, and they jammed through Brett Kavanaugh, someone who was facing serious charges of and detailed charges of sexual assault that he denied, but there was substantial testimony under oath in favor of, as well as my work showing that he had lied under oath, that he had committed perjury to the United States Senate in his previous testimony, and even in the testimony during that confirmation hearing.
The Supreme Court justice committing perjury is sitting on the Supreme Court. Let's just be clear. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And then you have Amy Coney Barrett, who was jammed through the Senate 1 month before the presidential election by the same party that claimed that you couldn't confirm a nominee during a presidential election year. And so they basically have secured a majority. Basically, it's an ill-gotten majority, because but for those two the bookends, leaving aside Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court would be a majority in the other direction. It would be not a majority of Republican appointees. It would be a majority of Democratic appointees, and perhaps Kavanaugh would not have been confirmed because any reasonable president would have withdrawn someone with the background and issues that had been raised. Anyone who wasn't actually himself accused of a sexual assault would have backed away from someone else who was legitimately accused of sexual assault. But that's not all.
And that unreasonable president, by the way, was Donald Trump.
Yes.
So
yes.
he probably was not going to intervene on the basis of Kavanaugh being a sexual harasser.
No, that's right. That's right. And then you have Clarence Thomas, who, in my view, never should have been confirmed in the first place as well. He was someone who there was substantial evidence and testimony, compelling testimony, that he had sexually harassed an employee when he was the head of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and other evidence that was not presented before the committee at that time. And then subsequently, which I hope we'll talk about later, the role that his wife has played in extreme election activity, including her role in really amping things up toward the other coup, the other attempted coup on January 6th. And so I think you have a Supreme Court right now we have a Supreme Court right now that is illegitimate, and it is unrestrained by sort of normal traditional judicial impulses of restraint. Instead, it seems poised, and it has gone out of its way to choose cases to overturn decades of precedent. We saw that when it refused to put a hold or a stay in place in the face of a law that's plainly unconstitutional, the Texas law on abortion, which offends the primary long-standing rules under Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, these two Supreme Court decisions that sort of demarcate the right to abortion or women's reproductive autonomy. And so Texas passed a law that was clearly in violation of those terms. And this court, this majority, rather than hold that law in abeyance, has decided to let that law be in effect while it is poised to reverse those underlying precedents. And so we have extremists at the Supreme Court.
And I just have to deeply jump in on all of the Brett Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas stuff. As someone who fought those fights, my brain just like starts twitching automatically at their at the mention even of their names. But I do want to say that there are tons of questions in the comments, and I want to let people know that I'm seeing them, I hear them, and we're getting ready for them. We want to lay out a little bit of the background of this, but there's a lot of folks that are asking, Gil asks if a justice can be impeached. Neerman asks how Citizens United fits into all of this. Gil also asks if the court can be enlarged. Larry says he feels helpless, and what can we do? One thing you can do, and I'm oh, no, a little craziness there. You can sign up for our weekly email here at hightowerlowdown.org /email, and you can get all of the latest action items and things that are happening around the world. And I would also suggest that you head over to Lisa's website, True North Research, where she is doggedly following these issues and will happily lead you towards actions that you can take, which we will get into in a moment. But I just wanted to jump in and say, keep asking those questions. We will get to them. We have the time. We are going to get there. So jump on in, y'all. Jump on in.
Lisa is watchdoggedly watching and reporting on and taking action on and coming up with ideas of what we might do. And that is the whole purpose of this show, is how do we as just regular people come together and try to do something and get a focus on this, what amounts to corruption. And a coup is about as corrupt as you can be in a democracy. And that is what exactly that we are dealing with. And I want to get into some of the some of those points that you were just raising, Lisa. But first, I want to just make this point, which is the Supreme Court and the things that Lisa's talking about here, and this now super majority of 6 members out of 9 on the Supreme Court that vote in lockstep. What's the percentage of those 6 justices who have voted under the Roberts Court with the corporate controls Chamber of Commerce of the United States in all the cases?
Yes. So on a couple of data points, one is that this majority of these justices have been deciding time and time again in favor of corporations and in favor of the position taken by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But also they have been part of what Senator Whitehouse has described as this previously to now, this 5-4 majority, where there were a number of very close decisions that really have dramatically changed the structure of our democracy, have substantially harmed the structure of our democracy in 5-4 rulings that presumably now would be 6-3 rulings that are deeply damaging to our freedoms as Americans.
There have been 80 of those decisions, those 5-4 decisions under the Roberts Court, 80 of them. And 70% in cases, 70% of the cases have been, of these justices' decisions, have been in accordance with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is the chief lobbyist for giant corporations in our country. But I want to hit the point here, Lisa, a couple of times pretty hard, that that this is not esoteric stuff. These are not legalisms, though they are, of course, argued on that basis. But these are fundamental issues of life for just regular people. This is the money over democracy. That this court has ruled again and again and again that money has more rights than people do in our democracy. They have ruled again and again against working people, against the rights of labor, to be able to organize, to be able to collect dues, to be able to be a participant in the economy. They have ruled again and again to block the votes of people. And John Roberts himself, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was the man who wrote the decision in the act just recently to overturn the core, really, of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the act that Martin Luther King, John Lewis, and so many other people fought to make possible, an act that has actually worked in America to help democratize America. And he voted to kill that and led the charge to kill that, and that there was a decision rendered that said that, well, it wouldn't matter, but that it was no longer necessary because racism was dead in America. This I mentioned earlier that these are not regular people. They don't live in the real world, and obviously you're not living in the real world if you think racism is over.
Yeah, it is. It really is astonishing because Roberts sort of cut his teeth as a lawyer in the Reagan administration, literally arguing against the Voting Rights Act. So you have this landmark legislation in 1965 that attempted to undo 100 years of Jim Crow, pernicious, destructive decisions, rules by states to make it harder, in particular for African Americans to vote, but also, people who were poor. They had a number of ways to try to stop people from voting so that only their right people, in their view, would vote. You had, at the time that John Roberts was inside the Reagan administration attacking the Voting Rights Act, you had Paul Weirich, who was this right-wing activist who created the Heritage Foundation, with the help of money from the Coors fortune, which is one of the reasons why I'm not drinking Coors and never drink Coors. But you had Paul Weirich telling white evangelicals that we don't want more people to vote, that the influence of these white evangelicals goes down when more people vote. That was a very a candid statement about this hostility to voting rights. And then you had the Congress in 2006. It reauthorized the Voting Rights Act for another 25 years, that enforcement provision. It said that there was ample evidence that we needed to have these enforcement provisions because we faced continuing, racism in America. Obviously we do. And continuing risks that if the states were unleashed, they would act repressively and repress the right to vote. But John Roberts disregarded that finding by Congress. That's how much of an activist and a right-winger he is, to advance the personal agenda, his personal agenda from the early 1980s, to use his power on the Supreme Court to destroy that core enforcement provision of the Voting Rights Act. It's not just a provision, though, as you point out, Jim. It's our right to vote. It's our fundamental freedom to vote that this Chief Justice has assaulted in disregarding the findings of Congress and injecting his personal views and setting aside this fundamental provision of the law. And that's why we've had hundreds of these voter repression measures introduced in the face of Donald Trump's lie, his false claim that the election was stolen. We've seen this wave of legislation being pushed to make it harder for Americans to vote because the Voting Rights Act provision is not in place. And that's directly because this Supreme Court, this out of control, reactionary, extremist Supreme Court, took it on themselves, and John Roberts led that charge, as you said, to utterly destroy our core freedom to vote as Americans. People should be righteously outraged by this arrogant act, by this arrogant Chief Justice, no matter how twinkly his blue eyes are.
Well, blue eyes aside, not only is he defying the will of Congress, in this case of the Voting Rights Act, but more importantly, he's defying the will of the people. In all of these cases that we're talking about, these direct assaults on people's rights, your rights, not somebody else's rights, your rights, in defying your rights, they are asserting their partisan will over the will of the people. These are very unpopular decisions that this court is rendering, but they don't have to pay attention. They're on the court for life. They don't have to pay attention to you. They don't even know you. And they're certainly not in your community. If they talk to anybody outside the judicial world, it's money people. It's the Koch brothers. It's the Mercer family. It's the Bradley family. It's the, right on down the line of the Coors family, as Lisa was just saying. That's who controls them, to establish a plutocratic rule over our society. You take that abortion case, for example. It came out of Mississippi just recently, and the court rejected a right-wing appeals court decision that the Mississippi abortion law was unconstitutional, and it set it aside without any argument, without any reasoning portrayed. It just said, "We rule, you don't."
Yeah,
we rule that it is constitutional for the moment. It's the case is still ongoing. There's complicated stuff, but nonetheless, but they were defying the will of the people. Hello, justices. 6 in 10 Americans have said passionately that these deeply personal decisions about abortion and women's health are the domain of the women, not of government, not of 6 people sitting on the Supreme Court, 5 of which are men. And yet the court has arrogantly ruled and intends to overrule the right to abortion, period. Despite the fact that, again, more than 6 in 10 Americans believe that right exists in law and in fact and in life. So that's what we're dealing with here. This is not esoteric legal stuff. It boils down to that, unfortunately, and that's why you don't know about it. Because the media can't quite comprehend it and doesn't cover it. Politicians don't want to try to explain it because they can't quite, and so they're able to get away with it. So that's what we're trying to confront. And Lisa has had a lifetime of confronting, is this arrogance of power in the hands of, right now, 6 people. And who knows what's next to come along, to say they will rule, that they will control, and that they will give power to right-wing interests, to theocratic interests, and to kleptocratic corporate interests as well. Really, what we're facing here. DZ, you have something to say to us?
No, Lisa has clearly something to say more important than me.
Turn Lisa loose. Turn her loose.
I was going to say a couple of things, Jim. So, that stat of, more than 60% of Americans support women's right to choose and women's right to make a decision themselves with, their conscience, their family, their doctors, and not for government officials, not for demagogues in the state legislatures or in the court to decide. In fact, the right to abortion is more popular than any recent president, more popular than Joe Biden, more popular than Donald Trump. The right to abortion is that popular. Compared to these politicians, more popular than any of these local politicians.
Very good.
And yet this court has been handpicked by Leonard Leo, working on behalf of his secret funders, the billionaires who back him and that have been writing these secret checks to the organizations that he's helping to orchestrate, which we tallied at nearly $600 million over the last 8 years that has been raised to capture the Supreme Court and these other state Supreme Courts. They want that right destroyed. And they don't have the guts, they don't have the courage to come out in public and say who they are. And Leonard Leo hides them from you, who is actually behind this packing of this court, the capturing of the court in order to destroy our rights under Roe. But it's not just Roe versus Wade. The people who want to destroy Roe versus Wade also don't believe that women have a right to access to contraception. They want to overturn Griswold versus Connecticut, which is this fundamental decision that said women do have a right to have contraceptive, that states can't bar women from accessing those medical devices, so that they can make their own determination of their future, determine their destiny and their family's destiny about whether they want to have children or not and when they want to have children. So these are extreme views. It's out of the mainstream to be opposed to abortion, and some of these individuals who have been pushing for these measures, who are backing these appointments, don't believe there should even be an exception for rape or incest for your daughter, your neighbor, your niece, someone who has been violated, to not have the right to an abortion. And so these people are extreme, and I think we just have to say that they are in fact extremists, and they are out of step with the mainstream, and they want to use this power in order to advance their personal ideological agenda to rip away our rights.
These are partisan because they're all Republican. They're all appointed by Republicans. They're all members of this thing called the Federalist Society, and we're going to talk more about that in our part 2 of this show. And this person, Leo Leonard, that Lisa refers to, almost nobody in America has ever heard of him, but he is an enormous power behind this coup and has been pushing it for years. And we're going to explore him and precisely who's putting money up. And by the way, money, we don't mean putting $1,000 in a campaign. We don't mean putting $100,000 in a campaign. We mean putting millions of dollars, sometimes $24 million from a single contributor to try to pull off this coup on America. That's the level of effort that the powers that be are making in this. It's about abortion, but it's about worker rights. It's about any individual rights. It's about democracy itself. The power of money in democracy. They want to enthrone money in America. So that is what we're dealing with here, and that's why here on the old Chat and Chew roundtable, we're spending quite a bit of time on this, because this is not something that comes up in presidential debates. It's not something that is talked about in your local congressional campaign. It's not something that the media spends any serious amount of time on. They mention it here and there, but they're not on it. This is a direct assault on the very idea of America, that the people rule, not 6 justices on the Supreme Court. So I want to jump in just a little bit on where this came from. Again, I'm calling it a coup because it is. And not only is a coup, but I have in my hand documentation.
Oh, I can put the documentation on the screen if you want.
Let's see it, DZ. This is a document written in 1971 by this handsome guy on the right there.
Oh my gosh, he's so creepy. When I was prepping this slide, I was just like, it's an actual vampire who is coming for us. Great.
Lewis Powell was a tobacco industry lobbyist in 1971. He was on the board of Philip Morris. He was an apologist, of course, an enabler of the poisoning and killing of millions of Americans. But he, in 1971, wrote a memo, which is on the screen right there, the Powell Memo, that was basically a manifesto of how corporate America could take over the Supreme Court. He was arguing that the corporate powers were ignoring the possibility offered by this tiny branch of government. And in fact, in the memo, it has a chapter, Neglected Opportunity in the Courts. He says that under our constitutional system, especially with an activist-minded Supreme Court, the judiciary may be the most important instrument for social, economic, and political change that corporations want. This is a vast area of opportunity for the Chamber of Commerce, he wrote, and it will work if in turn business is willing to provide the funds. Needless to say, business was more than willing to provide the funds. 2 months after Lewis Powell wrote this memo, Richard Nixon appointed him to the Supreme Court. And he sat there on that court and enacted the plutocratic ideas, or voted to support, to enact the plutocratic ideas that he advocated for in this memo. This is as close to a smoking gun as I think we can get in America for an assault on democracy, Lisa.
That's right. And, you know, that memo was written 50 years ago. And so it's like, why respond to a 50-year-old memo? Because it has been systematically implemented. And Charles Koch, who's one of the richest billionaires in the world, who controls one of the largest privately held corporations in the world, has been the deepest and longest investor in advancing that Powell memo and basically taking it further. He has been instrumental in funding these fights to pack the court with what he calls rule of law judges, which basically means rolling back the law to that robber baron era, to that Lochner era where judges were ruling in favor of corporations and striking down legislation to protect workers' rights that people were clamoring for in the Industrial Revolution. Charles Koch has been instrumental in really advancing this agenda that Powell set forth. And Powell, as you said, on the court, used his power to advance a corporate agenda, basically invented the idea of corporate rights. There was some earlier decisions that they hung their hat on, the Santa Clara case, over 100 years ago, but really Powell is the one who moved that doctrine forward. And that doctrine that Powell really advanced is the foundation for the Citizens United decision that I know one of the audience members was flagging. That Citizens United decision elevated, as you said, Jim, money, enthroning money as the most dominant power in our democracy, not the power of the people by one person, one vote. Justice Stevens, who has since retired, wrote a dissent and said, when the American people look at our political system, the one thing they don't think we need is more money in politics. Like, that's not what's happening here. But that court with Roberts at the helm was determined to advance Koch's agenda, to attack these anti-corruption measures that are known as campaign finance laws and destroy the McCain-Feingold provisions that were designed to deal with this insurgence of cash right before elections, where the donors were secret. As soon as that decision came down, Charles Koch met with his billionaire buddies and strategists and then began to unfurl, this more than 10 years of massive spending in our elections through a bunch of groups and shell groups and campaigns to try to basically take over every level of government. They haven't been successful in every election, but they have grossly distorted both public opinion and public policy. And the Supreme Court right now has taken on a case it took on a Koch case a year ago, but now it's taken on this case involving the EPA, whether the EPA has authority to regulate carbon under, reasonable interpretation of its regulations. That is a case that is the Koch wish list, the Koch dream list of this billionaire oil baron, Charles Koch, who's got such extremist views as a person who, basically has embraced what was called at the time, when he started embracing this in the 1960s, AnarchoCapitalism, this idea that government exists only to protect property. And as you point out, Jim, this completely false notion that our Constitution is a servant to property and property is the highest right. In fact, we had a whole war, in the Civil War that reset the clock and said, no, in fact, we have human rights. We have a right to equal protection of the law. We have the right to due process of law. We have these rights that are guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and then amendments that came after that said that America could fulfill this promise, the promise that it holds for democracy, and not just be beholden to the richest few, to the slaveholders, to the slaveholding class. But people like Charles Koch have sought to elevate property as the highest right, including corporate property, and to free it from regulations that we, the people, want, need, and clamor for, because we don't want corporations to be destroying our planet, and we don't want corporations to be setting tax policy and paying hardly pennies on the dollar while we pay our taxes. They don't pay theirs. That's not what the American people want. But people like Charles Koch want that, and that's why he embraced Donald Trump's tax cut. It was really the Charles Koch tax cut, and that's why Charles Koch invested heavily in trying to pack this Supreme Court.
Yes, and it was
100%.
easy.
No, I just want to say that I really love the tie back to this idea of property and tying it back to the Civil War. Owning people is a bad idea, as it turns out, like fundamentally a bad idea.
Was property, and that was originally part of the Calhoun, John C. Calhoun concept of
exactly
a constitution based on property, because it was all about owning.
and I think this is where you really see the ideology. You can apply this to abortion. You can apply, people who can get pregnant are ultimately the property of the people who got them pregnant. And kind of all of these ideas, kind of stem from these ideas of property. And what's that?
Workers.
Workers are property. Labor is property.
That workers should become slaves because they would be better taken care of if they were slaves.
Yeah, I was at a meeting with I was speaking about Citizens United, and there was this small meeting, and I had substituted in for someone. Sorry for this little digression. But the lawyer who set up the Citizens United case, he didn't argue it, but he was the main lawyer. This guy named James Bopp was presiding over this little table of people who were right-wingers, who were really excited about the Citizens United decision and, what they could do. And they were, literally talking about how this case about one person, one vote should be overturned because, why shouldn't people with more property have more say?
Yeah,
I was so shocked to hear it.
Yeah,
out loud.
just straightforward.
Yeah,
like isn't it obvious? Speaking of obvious thing, there's still tons of questions that we really want to get to, and I want to remind folks that this is part one of a show that we're doing, and the next show will be in a couple of weeks, and likely Lisa will be back if we all like her very much. And but we do have some questions. A couple of questions that are first one, technically, and I'll stay on for this one, then I'll ask some more. But can a justice be impeached? Can a Supreme Court justice be impeached? And why hasn't it happened already is my question.
Yeah. Well, yes. In fact, in the history of impeachment in the United States, the body or the officer that has been most impeached have been judges. So the impeachment power has been used almost entirely against judges, not against members of Congress or presidents. And so the reality is that many judges have been impeached over time, just not recently. And in fact, Congress has the power to impeach Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Thomas. If they chose to, they could begin hearings and hold those votes. The constraint is really a political constraint in the sense of the sort of wasteland that the Senate has become with the control of the minority by Mitch McConnell. So this question arises of, do you want to impeach someone if the Senate won't convict? So you could impeach these justices, and then the challenge is Mitch McConnell and his lockstep Republicans who vote 100% together. They don't diverge, maybe just rarely, even on Trump's impeachment, there was ample evidence for him to be convicted. So that's what's holding it up, is this question of, if they do the impeachment work, will the Senate convict? I don't think they should let the Senate dictate that. I think a justice should be impeached if there's evidence for it, and I think there is evidence to support impeachment in at least 2 instances, in my view, and then let the chips fall where they may in the Senate. If the Senate refuses to convict, then hold those senators accountable who refuse to convict for the corruption or for the perjury that is manifest.
And
Go ahead.
May I just interject that it's not Mitch McConnell who's preventing that vote. It is the Koch brothers in the Bradley family and et cetera. Money itself.
Yes.
Saying,
yeah, absolutely.
This is the vote we want.
Yeah. It is the money that Mitch McConnell serves. Mitch McConnell serves that money just with 100% loyalty.
Honestly, certain Democratic senators that we all know and have been talking about these last few months of trying to get stuff done in the country and who are holding it up. And
but we're gonna talk in part 2 of this to a senator who is doing something about it, and that would be Sheldon Whitehouse, senator from Delaware. And we'll hope to have him on the show, but we're certainly going to be talking about his terrific and quite lonely fight.
If you would like to know about when we are hosting the next show and live and when you can join, there's a magical URL on the screen, hightowerlowdown.org/email. Sign up. You will get emails from Hightower pretty much every single week about what's happening and what we're doing and what we're up to, and all kinds of goodies. And I do want to before we run out of time here, I do want to run into the question of what can everyday people do. Larry expressed very early on he feels really helpless when we have this judiciary system and we have these problems set up in this way. Like what can everyday people do? Any ideas, any suggestions?
Well, first of all, I would just say, don't give up, because that's exactly what can I say bastards on here? That's what the bad guys,
you just can't drop F-bombs.
They want.
Oh, the 5G is giving out. Oh no. Lisa's going to come back. Hightower, we can keep talking.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so these are not preordained decisions. This is something that American people can rise up against.
Lisa's point is straightforward. We can't give up. First of all, we have to know about it, and we know things are screwed and screwy, and so that's step number 1. And then step number 2 is join with others, and there are groups that are working on these issues, and we hope with more exposure such as this, we're going to line other people up to go at the Mitch McConnells and to create this little d Democratic force that will take on the plutocratic powers that are trying to control our country. Lisa's back.
Sorry for that technical glitch there. The internet went down suddenly at the last minute, but we have a lot of organizing to do. As one of the great heroes of our time said, "Don't agonize, organize." These decisions.
Who said that?
These decisions that are about to come out are decisions that we have to use as fuel to basically reset the clock and say, we are not going to go down this path. We're not going to take this jet this jetpack, as Jim said, back to the robber baron era. We refuse, and we're going to organize, and we're going to basically expand that court, get people on the court that look more like the rest of America, that aren't from these elite extremist backgrounds in their own way, and really democratize our country and have a healthy democracy. And we refuse to let our democracy be stolen from us.
That's absolutely right. And like Ray is saying right here, I just signed up to write postcards to voters in critical races. Let's go. That actually does matter. It feels a little bit weird, but honestly, I love postcard writing. Just as a side note, you get your friends together, you get everybody together, you get a stack of postcards, and you all hang out together when it's safe and doable to do so, COVID wise, obviously. And you write postcards together. It's actually a weirdly nerdy good time.
You can contact Lisa and her organization to get talking points, so that when your Congress critter has a public meeting, what do they call those things, town hall thing, which they rarely do, but when they do, that you were there with this question, raising this question about Supreme Court supremacy in America, and how we defeat that. I'd be interested to see, to hear the reaction of anybody to whether they even understand the question.
Yeah, that Jim, that's a great idea. We should be helping to organize and encourage people to use those August town halls, assuming they're going to have them, to get this question out there: why this extremist Supreme Court is allowed to, proceed in this way, and how we need to respond to that. I think that's a brilliant idea.
And also to go to the media with it. I mean, where's your newspaper? Well, where's your newspaper, period? Maybe you don't have a newspaper anymore, but to go to the TV stations and to all the media, and to the internet, which is now more powerful than all the rest of them, and say, what about this? I mean, who the hell elected these 9 people to rule over us? And to substitute a plutocracy for democracy. And that's fundamentally what we're involved in here. So we love and appreciate Lisa Graves for her tremendous work that she's done on this. Again, it's been a lonely, 30, 40 years you've been working on this. But now I think it's coming to a head. It's coming to an awareness among the public to where, wait a minute, what is this thing called the Supreme Court? Who elected them, and why aren't they listening to us? And what can we do about it? So that is a bold step, and so we're going to be back. And as DZ indicated, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be back with another part 2 of this, detailing who's doing this to us, and what can we do about them. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for being with us. Keep trucking all the way home to Wisconsin from Florida, where she so courageously joined us. And we'll join all of you in a couple of weeks. Look forward to being with you. Keep happy.